In the last lesson, we created our first index.php file where we simply echoed hello world. I'm going to drag that file back into my code editor, and today I'd like to teach you about variables. So I will go to, in Sublime Text, View, enter distraction-free mode. That way we can focus only on the code. So the first thing I want to do is explain to you in a little more detail what we have going on here. So first, when we open up PHP, this is our way to tell Apache that we need to execute some PHP. So for example, if I delete this, and I'm going to add some HTML here, my website, this is something you're familiar with, and we'll add an H1 and give it a heading of my website. If I were to view this in the browser, notice that we only have HTML. There is no PHP here, but we still have that PHP extension. But that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. Let's come back and view it in the browser. Once again, I'm going through localhost so that we can send this file through our web server. I'll reload the page, and if I view the source, either by going to View, Developer, View Source, or I press Command-Option-U on the Mac, we of course see what we have in our editor. But now I'm going to take that snippet from the last lesson and paste it in below. Now let's go back and view the live page. Yep, we get Hello World. But if I view the source and reload it with Command R, I want you to note that there is no PHP here. And that's because before it's actually rendered on the page, what Apache is doing is it comes to this line, it finds that it's PHP, it recognizes the PHP because we have that installed, and then it goes ahead and executes that code. But ultimately, when it's displayed on the page, we get simple HTML. That's the only thing that's coming out. But now at this point, all we're doing is displaying hello world. How is that any different from doing this, hello world? If I come back, reload the page, it's not any different at all. But what makes PHP unique is that we can have conditionals and variables and arrays, and we have lots of control over how we display the page. So for example, depending upon what your search results are, we can customize the output or what you see on the page dependent upon those parameters. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's go back and delete this PHP block. Now first we have this section right here. We have an angled bracket, then question mark, then PHP. And then note that we specified that we've closed PHP by doing the opposite. So we have this figure right here. And as we know now, this means anything within this block is PHP, and we need you to execute it accordingly. Next, we have echo. An echo is built into PHP, and it's a way for us to simply print something onto the screen. I can also change this to print, reload the page, and we still get the same thing. But I'm going to stick with echo. Then, because we are echoing what we call a string, and a string is simply text within quotation marks. We can either use double quotes, or we can use single quotes to specify a string. So you might be wondering, well, why don't we just echo hello world like this? Why can't we do that? Well, let's try it out. Nope, we're going to get a server error. And while we're here, I do want you to note that this isn't helpful at all, right? We've made a mistake, but all we're getting is this server error. What was the mistake that we made? Well, we'll take a look at how to display errors in an upcoming lesson. But for now, ignore it for the time being. Now, the reason why this does not work is because PHP is going to assume that hello is built into the PHP language. Is it a variable? Is it a function? Is it a class? What is it? Well, in our case, we want to say, no, it's just regular text. It's a string of text. So we need to wrap it within quotation marks. Come back, now it's working again. All right? Now the last thing I want you to take a look at is this semicolon. And I want you to get in the habit of every command, and this is a command right here. We are executing a command that echoes hello world to the screen. When you finish a command, you're always going to end it with a semicolon. And think of this as a simple way to say, end command. We're done with this command, move on to the next one. So toy around with this syntax, try to commit it to memory. Once you do, now let's take a look at variables. So I'm going to delete that, and I want you to note that PHP, it can extend for all of these blocks. It's not white space dependent, whether this is on the same line as this. So within here, let's simply echo my name, and my name is Jeffrey. So we know that we can do echo Jeffrey Way. We can do that, but why don't we instead store my name within a variable? So we can create variables in PHP by using a $sign followed by the name of the variable. So in this case, we'll say the variable name is called name, and that's going to be equal to a string. So note in this case, I'm using double quotes. It doesn't really matter what you use, though there are times when you would use single and double. But more than anything, you want to make sure that you're not just blindly switching between the two in your application. If you switch, you should have a reason why you're doing it. So now we've created a variable called name. If we view this in Chrome though, nope, we don't get anything at all. And of course we don't. We created a variable, but we didn't do anything with it. So now we want to do something with it. So we will use the echo command that you've already learned. This time we're going to echo hello, and we'll leave it as that. And if I come back, yep, now we're getting hello, good. But we also want to echo name. So you might be thinking, well, we can do this. And you know what? You're actually right. You can, when using double quotes, embed a variable name. So if I come back, reload the page, check it out. You just said hello and your custom variable. But I want you to note that if you were to change this to single quotes, and this is the main distinction between using single and double quotes. I reload the page and we get that variable name. And that's because when you're using double quotes, PHP actually checks to see, is there a variable embedded within here? If it is, then I'm going to replace that variable with whatever it is equal to. But when there's single quotes, PHP doesn't do that at all. But now that begs the question, well, how would you do this with single quotes? Well, what you would do is you would say hello, we're going to add a space for the next word, and now we're going to use concatenation. And concatenation is just a word, it's just jargon to mean add to. We're going to add to this string. So with some languages, you might be used to plus. So echo hello plus name. This is essentially how you would do it in JavaScript. However, in PHP, we use p, and that's the same thing. We're just going to append the variable to this string. Now, if I come back, reload the page, we are getting hello Jeffrey Way. So we have this option. We can still use double quotes. Nothing wrong with that. That's fine as well. But now we get them right next to each other. And note that PHP isn't paying attention to white space, so it doesn't know, oh, we need to add a new line. So it just adds it immediately after. And that's okay. We could put these within paragraph tags, but then you might find something new. And this is a new concept. You can't do this. If I come back, reload the page, there's that nasty server error again. Now the problem is, within here, we're not running HTML, we're executing PHP. So this block right here, that doesn't mean anything. That's not part of the PHP language. So how would you do that? Well, what you would do instead is you would either close PHP by placing this closing block, and then you would run your list item, but then you would have to open up PHP again. I'm going to get rid of this line for now, and we'll change this list item to a paragraph. So now we have PHP, we create a variable, we close PHP, now we're back to just HTML. We're going to add a paragraph, then we're going to open up PHP again, we're going to echo hello name. Now I need to close PHP, and then we can add our closing paragraph tag, and that would work. Reload the page, yep, now that's going to work. If we add one more, and we'll say hello again. Reload the page. Now, those are both within paragraph tags right here. So you'll find that many times you need to figure out how to best organize your page so that it's as clean as possible. Another way you could do this is rather than closing out PHP, we'll get rid of these right here. We will echo and we will add the paragraph within it, like so. Then we will append a closing paragraph at the end. Save it like that, get rid of this one here, and this is another way we could do it. Reload the page, and now we're getting the same effect. The only difference is, in one case, we're closing PHP, adding the paragraph, or whatever the tag is, and in this case, we're echoing out the paragraph. So now you might be thinking, well, what is this for? What is the point of using variables? Well, think of it from this point of view. Let's get rid of the paragraphs, just to make things a little more readable for the time being. And let's say we have hello name. Now I'm going to continue adding my string. We'll add a period to represent the end of the sentence. And we'll say, how are you doing today? And this time I'm going to write my name. Let's get rid of this. Hello, Jeffrey Way. There we go. So it's very redundant and badly written, but this will get my point across. So if we come back, reload the page, of course, this is what you're getting. So now I want you to note that we've doubled up here. So what if we want to change the name to Jeffrey Smith? Well, we would have to change it here. We would have to change it here. Now that's a very simple example, but you can imagine for a large application, if you need to change something, you would have to do it in every single place that it occurs. And you could do a find and replace, and that would be okay for one file, but what if there's multiple files? Then maybe you're doing a find and replace project-wide. It's just not a good idea. You can imagine this for maybe colors for backgrounds in CSS. And that's why people want variables in CSS, and lots of preprocessors have allowed them that. So, and the same thing is true for PHP. If we store it once within a variable, then we can simply embed the variable, assuming we're using double quotes. And now we can add it again. So this time we're getting the same effect, but if we do need to change it, we only change it once, and then it will be represented throughout your application whenever that variable is referenced. So that's about as simple an example I can provide you. There's lots of more intricate reasons why you would use variables, and we're going to cover all of those in this course. For now, think of variables as a way to store information. It's a way to take information and store it within an easily accessible variable name. Maybe you want to grab something from the query string. A query string is something that occurs, if you've ever seen in the browser, something like name equals John. This would be called the query string. Well, maybe with PHP, you want to grab the value of this name key and store it in a variable. Well, you could do that. And in this case, you would actually use $_get name. And this is called a super global array, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. For now, I want you to think about how we're grabbing that value and we're storing it within a variable. Now, I'm going to backtrack just a couple steps. And the final thing I'll leave you with is what happens if I forget to close that double quote? Well, if I come back, we get that server error, and that is not helping anyone. We want a way to actually debug and figure out where did this error occur, and that's what we'll take a look at in the next lesson.